Okay, hello internet. I'm somebody who kind of likes following geopolitics and politics in general. And one question that I've always kind of grappled with was how, as an American, I mean, how should America, what should America's role in the Middle East be? Should it have a role? Is there a constructive role? Is there a beneficial role? And I feel like the whole region's a lot more complicated. I mean, I think one of the big reasons why America hasn't done terribly, but there's been a lot of blunders. And I think a reason for a lot of those blunders were just ignorance of Islamic societies in general. And I think even today, you see most of these people marching for Palestine, and they didn't, or even Israel for that matter. But you see a lot of these people, and I feel like they really don't understand the wider context. And this is more of a video about the wider region, not about Israel. But I think the first thing that people kind of have, I should just say out front, I'm no genius. I'm no expert. I feel like this is just what I've learned from my interactions with this crowd. I think if you really want to understand the Middle East, I mean, Islam is really at the heart of it. Behind not all, but behind so much of the political, cultural, movements, and why it came to be the way it is. And you have to kind of understand the nature of Islam. I mean, I'd recommend everybody read through the Quran. It's not that long. It's worth reading through at least once. And one thing you'll quickly learn about Islam is that the Quran is only one part of what Muslims believe. There's the Quran, then there's the Sunnah, which is it's sort of like scattered. It's like fragments of what Muhammad said, or what they call them, companions of the Prophet, companions of the Prophet said around him. And these were, and the Quran by itself is pretty short. The whole corpus of all the hadiths are what make up the Sunnah. Is there's tens of thousands of hadiths, and it's not like they come in a book. I mean, you can buy a book of them, and scholars in the olden days compiled lists of them. But the way they were transmitted is that they were, and the way they were recorded in history was that, it's transferred to one person orally, and then to another person orally, and then to another person. And then it was written down at some point. And some of these have more, they're more authentic than others. So some hadiths are considered higher, or considered more trustworthy than others. And I think, a thing about the Middle East that's different from China, it's different from Asia, East Asia or Southeast Asia or India or South America. You kind of have to separate the world into cultural spheres. You can, I feel like you can kind of group up Europe, the American continent, and sort of South Africa, not the country, but sub-Saharan Africa. And that it's more or less has a standardized culture, sharing same family of languages, similar education systems, similar governmental systems, similar traditions, same religion. But North Africa, like sort of a North India, the Arabian Peninsula, Turkey, Iran, all the Middle East. This is a region of the world that's been in conflict with the West for hundreds of years. So there's like a passed down antagonism. I mean, when Chinese come over here to America as immigrants, like Chinese people by themselves aren't particularly all that political. I feel like it's mostly the same with Indians. Like they're very adaptable, moldable, I guess you can say. But that's not really the case with the Middle East. Just there's a complex history of invasions, like both into Europe and into the Middle East. And that kind of creates like shared experiences, shared memories that kind of get passed down through the ages. And so it looks like, when you pull like countries in the world who dislike like America the most, all the Islamic countries like always routinely rank like high up there. And I don't believe it's only for colonialism. I mean, a lot of people make that argument, but I don't think that completely explains it, because there was a lot of places in the world that got colonized. China, India, Japan, the Philippines, but they don't share nearly the same amount of hostility as, people from the Middle East. Because I do believe there's a genuine hatred there. And a lot of at the core of it is a religious fight. I mean, when people talk about the Quran, like they'll point towards passages pretty early in the text that are relatively, amiable, conciliatory. But they often fail to point out verses like 98:6, where it says, "Indeed, those who disbelieve from the people of the book and the polytheists will be in the fire of hell, to stay there forever. They are the worst of beings." I mean, and you can make all sorts of interpretations, or say it's actually saying this, or it's only saying a very small group of people. It's not actually targeting Jews and Christians in general, but it's debatable. And that's only if you're just taking the Quran. If you go into the Sunnah, which majority of Muslims believe in the Sunnah, like it isn't some niche thing. Like some of them are funny, some of them are kind of despicable, some of them are just ridiculous. I mean, and nobody can actually read through all of them. Like, it'd be impossible to. I mean, if you just take a couple of them, this says, Allah's messenger said, "The hour will not be established till the buttocks of the woman of the tribe of Daus move while going around the Diyal Khalasa." The Diyal Khalasa was the idol of the Daus tribe, which they used to worship in the pre-Islamic period of ignorance. It's like, okay. How about another one? Not that. Then you have this one. Allah's messenger said, any Muslim whose 3 children died before the age of puberty will be granted paradise by Allah because of His mercy to them. Which is interesting because why? So anybody... so if you took this literally, then you could have 3 children and have them killed or have somebody else kill them and you're guaranteed a trip into paradise. Let's see. Oh, here's one. Evil omen was mentioned before the Prophet. The Prophet said, if there is evil omen in anything, it is in the house, the woman, and the horse. Isn't that fascinating? Let's see, I got a couple others here. There would come people amongst the Muslims on the day of resurrection with as heavy sins as a mountain, and Allah would forgive them, and He would place in their stead the Jews and the Christians. So I guess, I guess Muslims, instead of Christ doing the redeeming of sins, they will have Jews and Christians to redeem the sins of the Muslims. Isn't that fascinating? How about this? The Prophet said, Allah wonders at those people who will enter paradise in chains. Well, I didn't know God could get confused. That's kind of interesting. How about this one? This one's long, which you can go down to here. It says, then Allah said to the hellfire, you are my means of punishment by which I will punish whoever I wish of my slaves, and each of you will have its fill. As for hellfire, it will not be filled till Allah puts His foot over it, whereupon it will say, Kati, Kati. At that time it will be filled, and its different parts will come closer to each other, and Allah will not wrong any of His created beings. As regards paradise, Allah will create a new creation to fill it with. So Allah has feet, apparently. I feel like with those verses you kind of get an idea of kind of what the these are like. And you can spend the whole lifetime studying these. But you kind of get the point. It's a very, it's a religion that creates a big emphasis on an in-group and an out-group. And, if you're part of it, then you're part of it. If you're outside of it, then you're outside of it. And it also, develops, cultures with a lot of pride. And I feel like you kind of have to keep that in mind when you're dealing with, Arabs or Muslims in general. But then you get to the more political side. There's two main states in the Middle East. There's a lot of, of course there's a lot of disputes on what exactly the Middle East should look like. And Muslims agree on this about as much as Westerners agree on this. There's Iran, and it's kind of Shia allies, in Yemen and Lebanon and Iraq. And then there's more of the Sunni monarchies in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Morocco. Egypt is primarily Sunni too, but it's not It's not a monarchy. And it's also the UAE, Kuwait. And one thing too is that these groups really don't like each other very much. And one thing in relation to the US is that, the Sunni monarchies are relatively friendly with the United States, or at least willing to play along. Iran is kind of not. But don't think that that is because they are particularly pro-American. I mean, at the end of the day, these states are, they're theocracies. You'll get in. If I lived in one of those countries, I wouldn't be uploading this video, because I'd probably get thrown in jail. Especially if you're a Christian or Jew too. They don't allow freedom of religion. In Saudi Arabia, if you want to become a citizen, you have to be part of the country. You have to be a Muslim. And there's all sorts of other things they practice that aren't particularly. I mean, their laws are harsh. They have a police state. The way they treat migrants, immigrants. I mean, you can be born there, you can live there for decades and never be a citizen, and be eligible to be kicked out on a dime. And then a lot of these countries will hire Africans and pay them like as maids, or look after the children, and pay them pennies and not treat them particularly well. But a lot of the authority, don't think Saudi Arabia or Jordan are pro-West. I mean, they're not. You have to kind of understand and the Iranian position is a lot clearer. I mean, it's more confrontational, so people think anti-West. They think of Iran because it's easier to spot. But don't think Saudi Arabia is particularly pro-West. Because Saudi Arabia diplomacy is probably a lot smarter than Iran is. And I think it's clear who's winning the century among the couple factions. Now, I should say too, Sunnis make up the majority of the Middle East. So maybe it's only natural for them to come out on top, but the Saudi position more is they need to. I mean, by themselves, you have to realize Saudi Arabia isn't a particularly rich country. Especially before the discovery of oil. So they needed foreign expertise. So they brought in oil companies. They brought in foreign oil companies. They brought in, they made alliances with America. And just for mutual. For mutual interest. Because Saudi Arabia and Iran, even though they're both nominally Muslim from the outside, they're part of two very different sects that have been fighting for hundreds of years. And Saudi Arabia too, they don't have the technical expertise. I mean, they're getting there. They're slowly getting there. I mean, due to their cooperation with America, I mean, they have modern fighters. Like, they can get modern. They can get investment. They can go into Western markets. They don't get sanctioned. They don't. They often don't end up on the receiving end of bombs. And they also have, because Saudi Arabia kind of had like a revitalization of Wahhabism, which is kind of the not state religion, but sort of like the strain of thought of the state. Because the Iranian Revolution spooked them because the Ayatollah really didn't like the the House of Saud in Saudi Arabia. And he if you actually look at the speeches, like he cursed Saudi Arabia and the other monarchies just as much as he cursed Israel. And it's debatable too on why, like the reasons why exactly the Iran-Iraq war occurred. I mean, some say it was like mostly Saddam Hussein who attacked like out of greed. Like others say it was more of a coordinated assault by Sunnis to subjugate Iran, like once and for all. Because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni, and that was one of the reasons for the outbreak of violence, like after the war. Because Saddam Hussein kind of held a firm grip on power, and then once that authority toppled, it spiraled into sectarian violence. Well, I think the point I'm getting with all of this is that Saudi Arabia is good with their diplomacy, with public relations. I mean, they weren't particularly used to be, but they're getting a lot better. And they've operated a lot better, but don't mistake that as being friendly with America. I mean, so I think what you have to understand, like when you're dealing with the I think what officials need to, like American officials need to understand when dealing with the Middle East, is that these people are fundamentally hostile to the U.S., but there's mutual interests in it. And if you're going for purely on the sake of human prosperity, I think these Sunni monarchies are about the best shot the Middle East has at serious economic development and raising people out of poverty. Because democracies have continuously failed in the Middle East. I mean, Turkey, it's hardly even a democracy. In Egypt, again, it's even worse than Turkey. And in Afghanistan and Iraq, the state just totally fell apart. The Arab conception of democracy seems to you vote once and then you never vote again until the charismatic leader leaves. And none of these states have done particularly well. Like, Turkey is definitely better than Egypt or Afghanistan. But can anybody particularly call Turkey a successful state? You should look up inflation in Turkey. It's not good. But I mean, you have to realize, like, you can't be naive towards Islam or towards the Middle East. But I think that the main mindset you have to adopt is there's common ground, And don't try to appeal on grounds of friendship or grounds of partnership or alliances. Like, they don't do that kind of talk. Like, Arabs are very transactional. And if anything, if you start talking in those terms, then you'll have other groups of, lots of groups of Muslims will go out and say something along the lines of so-and-so state or king or statesman is a puppet of the West for engaging in diplomacy. I mean, people don't take it seriously, but it's true. Like, this is the mindset. This is the mindset of a lot of people in the region. I mean, so it has to, like, be seen as, like not people with, like, ties. It has to be, like, what can the state get and what can America get? And that kind of has to be the basis for diplomacy, I think. Because anything else just isn't going to work. Like, the cultural differences are too vast. And if you do that, ultimately you'll undermine the authority of the ones engaging in diplomacy, like with the West in particular. And I think, too, when we're talking about Iran and why people shouldn't side with it, I mean, in the places where Iran has gone, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, has prosperity been brought to these countries? Now, forget Israel, forget Palestine. Just simply talking about Yemen or Lebanon or Iraq. Where Iran has meddled, has human happiness ever resulted out of it? I don't think so. I mean, is it ultimately a good thing for humanity? I mean, a lot of people think that, I think it's driven, like, out of a blind hate for Israel. And even if you assume that Israel is just some inherent evil, oppressing the Palestinians or something, and like, Iran's efforts, like, against Israel, like, even assuming Israel's evil, I don't believe it. I don't think it is. But even assuming that so, that does not negate the evil that they've done in Syria or in Yemen or in Lebanon. Like, don't let your hate for Israel cloud your judgment on Iran as a state. And Iran, too, like, I mean, it's not as bad as you'll often hear in the media, but it's a very stagnant country. Like, it isn't growing. The leaders aren't particularly forward-looking. But it's the opposite, too. Like, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, they've all developed very much, even in the past decade. And changes, like, they're making better lives for their citizens. And I don't think that, I mean, even if you simply take out American interests from the equation, like, these are the rulers that I think that are ultimately best for Muslims, for Arabs. And I don't think Iran is a good, either for Israel or for Muslims. And then I think another thing I wanted to talk about too is the Iraq War. I don't think America was morally in the wrong for Iraq. Like, I know weapons of mass destruction wasn't found, But honestly, you can't take what states say at face value. I mean, you take out that argument, but I still believe that Saddam Hussein deserved his fate. And his regime, too. I mean, this is the same man that initiated the Iran-Iraq War, which was one of the bloodiest conflicts in modern history. And he was the one that perpetrated it. I mean, he wasn't a good thing. Like, he also invaded Kuwait. Like, he wasn't a good thing for Muslims. Like, and he was a Ba'athist. Like, not even, I mean, you'll find, I mean, this was a secular state. I mean, he got a little bit more religious as he got older, but, you know, this was a rather secular ideology. And he didn't navigate politics well. His state got sanctioned. And by the end of his rule, like, the Iraqi economy was kind of in shambles. And he ran just a brutal state. And with the Kurds too, like, the Kurds were accused of aiding Iran in the Iran-Iraq War. And due to that, many of them were killed. Many. I mean, Saddam Hussein was not a good guy. I mean, I don't know why I have to make the argument that the Taliban is not a moral authority. I mean, so if you look at it purely from the standpoint of good of humanity, or deserving, like, I do believe Saddam Hussein in Iraq was deserving of the invasion, if you're looking at it purely from a good and evil standpoint. I mean, the failure wasn't the military, it was the, like, I just think a lot of it was ignorance. Like, trying to turn these people into Democrats was probably doomed from the start. Especially when the authorities are perceived as being servants of the West, which it's a death sentence to any authorities in this region. I mean, whether it's justified or not. It's a death sentence. But whether or not America should interact with the Middle East, I think yes. I don't think isolationism is a good thing. No, I don't think America is ever going to be liked in the Middle East. But you can't act on that assumption. And in regards to Israel, like, what exactly America should do to Israel? Well, first off, I should say, like, anybody who identifies as liberal or leftist, if you're backing if you think Palestine is a great cause, then I truly wish to implore you to do more research on not just Islamic society, but the countries that surround them. Like, look how life and social attitudes are in Cairo, for example. And you'll find, or even just interact with Muslims or Arabs, and you'll quickly find out they aren't exactly the most liberal of people. Though, I mean, I don't mind them so much, but I mean, just understand the people who you're interacting with. But I think Israel I mean, my stance towards Israel is basically there's no like unified authority like among Muslims. There's no caliphate. There's no state leading the ummah, and there's no better authority currently that would take the place of Israel. If you're truly concerned about the well-being of the citizens of Palestine, of Israel, I mean, you have Hamas and you have the PA, which both of them are horrible. I mean, one's a dictatorship and one's a terrorist organization. Israel, too, is also one of the most free places in the Middle East. I mean, I know the anti-Israel crowd will say so many things. Say Israel's hypocritical or whatever. But, you actually start comparing, you're looking at laws, the social attitudes, the political, the government. Israel is way more liberal than anywhere else in the Middle East. Way more, like, personal freedoms. But I think if there ever comes along a more competent authority that can lead Muslims, that can unite them, like, I think Israel should go. But in the meantime, the Middle East is scattered among like a dozen different countries, all competing against each other. Hardly any of them will agree with anybody else. And because you have to look at what will take the place of Israel if the state of Israel collapsed. And like, it'd probably lead to a massacre, and it'd probably lead to even worse conditions than what already are there. Yeah, I guess that's about it. Goodbye.